Hello, and welcome to the second part of the Bitsy Game Maker training series. In this video, we're going to learn more about the Paint tool to develop our avatar, sprites, and tiles. I'm now back in the Bitsy Game Editor, where we left off from our last lesson. If you don't have the Paint tool window open already, you can go to Tools at the top right-hand corner, and be sure to click on Paint, so it's selected in this dark blue color to have the window available for us. I'm going to go ahead and close the Tools window for now. So if I left click and drag the Paint window to the side here, we'll get a better view of the changes we're going to be making in this lesson. So to begin, I'm going to briefly go over each of these smaller tabs that are in the Paint window to just explain briefly what they're going to provide for us when we're developing our game together. The Avatar tab, if I hover over, is the player's character. So if I press play on the Room tab and use my arrow keys, you can see I'm moving as this playable character. I'm going to go ahead and press stop for now to go back into the editing mode. Tiles are decorative elements in our game. So that means if you're creating an environment, say for example grass or flowers or clouds, you're going to be using tiles to create these elements to develop your environment. Sprites are non-playable characters, or NPCs for short. If I go ahead and play again, and use my arrow keys to go up to this NPC and press my arrow key again to interact with it, we can see we're getting text that says, "I am a cat." So this is an interactive, non-playable character in our game. I'm going to go ahead and press stop to go back to editing. Key items, we're going to get more detail in further lessons. But these are items that we're going to be able to pick up in our game, and they also have dialogue for them as well. So we're going to begin by creating our avatar character. So be sure to have the avatar tab selected, so it's in this dark blue color. And we can see we have these small squares that are making up a grid to make up this character. So if I left click on one of the squares, it changes that square to blue. And if I click on it again, it turns back to white. So if I left click and hold, I can start erasing certain parts of this avatar. And then if I also pay attention to what's happening in the room window, we can see our avatar is updating in our game. So for example, I want my character to maybe be a duck in my game. So I can go ahead and start clicking on squares to start painting my avatar character. So maybe I want, this part to be the head. I maybe want one square to stay blue for the eye. Maybe I want him to have a little beak here. And I could just continue painting in squares and seeing how it's looking in my game, if I'm liking it or not. And I could always make changes along the way. Let's just say I really like what I have here. He looks like a very friendly duck. And this is perfect for how I want it to look in my game. We can now move on to the Tile tab. But before I do, you'll notice in the Avatar tab, we can only have one avatar, as these options are blanked out. So let's go ahead and click on the Tile tab now. Now we can see there's a similar window, but just with different colors. The light blue color corresponds to the tile color that is in our colors window. And same thing, if I click on one of the squares with the left click button on my mouse, we can see I could again erase certain squares and add them back in. But we want to maybe create a brand new tile because we want to start developing our environment for our game. We can see now there's this little plus button, and that's going to allow us to add a new drawing, or in this case, a new tile. So let's go ahead and click on the plus button. Now we have a blank grid provided for us, and we see it's called Tile B. I really like to stay organized when I work, so I really like to name my tiles, so when I'm developing my environment in my Room tab, I know exactly what I'm placing. So I'm going to name this Grass, for example. I'm going to go ahead and just create something really simple to represent grass. And then to include this new tile in our environment, we can go to the Room tab, and you can go ahead and click on any of these squares on the grid. And now I'm including my grass into my environment. And say if I want to now continue developing this further, maybe I don't want these blocks that are in my environment right now, as I really want this to be an outdoor scene. We can go ahead and actually click on these blocks in our environment to remove them from the scene. So if I left click and hold, I could start erasing certain tiles that I don't want from my scene. Perfect. Now I'm going to click again on the plus tab to add another drawing. This time I'm going to name it Clouds. I'm going to go ahead and draw out just a really simple cloud for my game. And it's okay if it's not perfect the first time. It always takes a little bit of practice to see how it's looking and if you like it in your game. So I'm going to go ahead and with the clouds tile, I'm going to click on one of the squares and I'm just going to start painting in some clouds in my scene. Now, I maybe want to make this a little more interesting. And this is where things get really exciting in the paint tool. We can actually add animations to various things within the paint tool. So for example, with our tiles, maybe I want my clouds to slightly move. So at the bottom here, we can see an animation tab. Let's go ahead and click on it. We can see that frame 1 is selected, and that is just our drawing that we've done of our clouds. So how are we going to animate this? Well, we see that there is a frame 2 beside it. Let's go ahead and click on it. So this is going to be where we can animate a new frame for my clouds to move. So what I can do is I can start left clicking and erasing what I have on my clouds, and we can see that it's updating again in our Room tab. But I want them to slightly maybe move up and down. I find a really good tip for that is I can see the outline of what I have on my frame 1. And I could use this as a guide to animate my clouds. So I'm going to go ahead and do my best to follow what I had in my outline and create my clouds. And same thing here, I'm just going to move it up slightly. And now I think that's really perfect. You could even see in the preview how our animation is looking. and we can also see it happening in our game. I just think it adds just a little something extra to your game and could be a lot of fun. So I can't wait to see what you create with your tiles and using animation to really add something extra to your game. Next, we're going to go to sprites. And if we remember from the first lesson, sprites are non-playable characters, but we can interact with them in our game. So just to recap, if I press play in the Room tab and use my arrow key to start playing my game and move around with my avatar, once I get close to my sprite, I can use the arrow key again, and we see that we get dialogue that says, I am a cat. So sprites we can interact with, and when we interact with them, we will get a dialogue box. So I'm going to go ahead and press the stop button in the Room tab, and let's go see what's going on in the Sprite tab in our paint window. We can see we have a sprite that's called Cat, and a dialog box that says, I am a cat. Let's go ahead and make a new sprite, and we can see, just like the Tile tab, there's a plus button, so we can go ahead and add a new sprite. I'm going to try and add in a frog, so I'm going to type in frog for my new sprite. I'm going to go ahead and start painting in my frog avatar. And it doesn't have to be anything super detailed. It could be really simple. I think that's perfect for my avatar. So I'm going to go ahead and in the Room window include this new sprite, my frog, into the Room window. But we want to be able to interact with this frog. So we can see we have a little dialog box at the bottom here. We can go ahead and type something in the dialog box. So I'm going to write, I'm a frog. And now we can actually test this in our game to see if it's working. So let's go to the Room tab and press play. And remember to use your arrow keys, and we can go ahead and go to our new sprite. And we notice he says, I'm a frog. So that's perfect. Our sprite's working. We can now press on the stop button to go back into our editing. And what's really great about sprites is they too have an animation tab. So we can now take our time to maybe add an animation for our new sprite. So in my example for my frog, maybe I want him to jump. So I'm going to go into my frame 2, and I'm just going to go ahead and erase what I have. And I'm just going to see if I can move him up a little bit. And see how that's looking. So that's great. In the Room window, I can see that he's jumping, and that's exactly what I wanted. So we can now press on the Animation tab to close it, and now we've created our first sprite. Before I conclude this lesson on the Paint tool, I just want to go over a few things that you might run into while you're creating your avatar, tile, and sprites, and particularly with adding animations. If you noticed, I accidentally clicked on the Animation tab to close it. But when I do that, we notice in the Room tab, my frog's not jumping anymore. So if you want to add animations on your avatar, tile, or sprites, you want to be sure that this animation tab is open with the dark blue color, and we can see our preview and our frames for example, my frog sprite. And we can see now he's jumping in the room tab. So that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. And as well, with our avatar, if I go back into our avatar tab, we can see there's an animation tab for your playable character as well. So I've included just a really simple animation here where I just removed his 2 feet and I just put one area here just so it gives that illusion that now my duck is walking. And that could just be a really simple way to show movement. And again, really emphasizing that things can be really simple in Bitsy. We don't have to overcomplicate things, which is really great. So I hope you really enjoyed this lesson on how we went over the paint tool to create our avatar, tiles, and sprites. And don't fret, we're going to be going over the key items in a future video, as they involve just a few more advanced steps than creating avatars, tiles, and sprites. So in our next lesson, we're going to go over how we can create a unique color palette using the color window, and I'm also going to show some really great resources that you can use that can help you develop your own color palette. And I'll see you in the next lesson.